The red alert klaxons wailed a broken, grating symphony of distress across the bridge of the USS Odyssey. Emergency crimson lights stained the desperate faces of the crew. Sparks showered from a cracked conduit near tactical, and the deck plating shuddered beneath their feet. The Odyssey was dying. Status report. Captain Elara Rivers' voice was a steady current cutting through the chaos. She stood tall at the center of the bridge, her uniform jacket torn at the shoulder, her eyes narrowed to slits of cold command. Rerouting auxiliary power to life support, Captain, reported pilot Jason Hampton, his knuckles white as he wrestled the helm. We're holding course, barely. Heavy hits to the port nacelle, shields at 8% and failing rapidly. The ship lurched violently, throwing communications officer Julie Hayes against her station restraints. The Anomaly's gravity well is tightening, cried Navigator Mark Hughes. We're spiraling toward the singularity at the heart of the Apex Anomaly. If we cross the event horizon, we're dust. Rivers gripped the arms of her command chair, fighting the urge to look back at the main view screen. The starfield was now a swirling vortex of impossible color and distorted light. The chaotic, hungry maw of the Apex Anomaly, a region of space they had been ordered to cautiously observe, not survive. Science Officer Hudson, tell me what we're fighting, Rivers demanded. Karen Hudson, usually precise, looked genuinely terrified. It's a localized, self-sustaining warp field, Captain. Not a natural singularity. It's tearing at our hull polarization fields. That's why the shields are useless. The Odyssey's molecular structure is destabilizing. Power fluctuations are synchronized pulses. Less than 6 minutes before reactor failure. 6 minutes. Not enough time to warp jump, even if the engines were functional. Julie, keep trying to punch through a distress signal, Rivers ordered. Use the high-frequency burst protocol. I'm trying, Captain, but the energy emissions here are blanketing everything, Hayes replied, slamming a fist against her non-responsive console. It's a complete blackout. We're alone. A grinding sound echoed from engineering. Engineering reports extreme plasma containment stress. A new voice cut in on the comms. Dr. Jason Henderson, the ship's medical doctor, doubled as emergency engineer. Captain, we need to jettison the core or we lose the ship now. But doing so will leave us dead in the water. Rivers closed her eyes for a brief moment, steadying the fear in the room. Jettisoning the core meant stranding them thousands of light years from the frontier, a fate almost as bad as being ripped apart by the anomaly. But not doing it meant immediate death. Negative on core jettison, Dr. Rivers stated. Jason Hampton, what's the closest region of stable space? Hampton didn't look up. There's a microfracture in the field about 50,000 kilometers on the port bow, Captain. But the power drain to turn and break free will overload the impulse couplings. We're going to be a derelict anyway, Rivers said, her voice dangerously calm. Full, unmitigated power into the maneuvering thrusters. Overload them. Burn them out. We execute the Sling-Brake maneuver. Navigator Hughes gasped. Captain, that's insane. The lateral stress alone will tear the auxiliary systems apart. I am aware, Mark, Rivers snapped. But it will give us the thrust we need to break the anomaly's gravitational lock and slingshot us into the microfracture. If we don't try it, the core goes critical in 5 minutes. She looked straight at Pilot Hampton. Jason, I need speed. I need precision. I need to be damn sure you can do this. Hampton finally looked back, meeting her gaze with grim determination. Aye, Captain. I'll get us through. Mark, I need a precise vector for that fracture, Rivers commanded, moving to stand behind Hampton, placing a hand on his chair. A reassuring gesture for her crew. Jason, on my mark, you're pushing the stick to 90 degrees port. Not 89. Not 91. 90. If we overshoot, the inertial dampeners will fail, and everyone on this bridge becomes paste. The turn is instantaneous, Captain, Hughes called out, his voice high-pitched with strain. The anomaly's forces are too erratic for a controlled curve. I've calculated a jump vector, a direct, near-orthogonal impulse burn. Feeding coordinates to Hampton's console now. Vector 344, Mark 12. Received, Hampton confirmed, priming the thruster controls. The ship will fight this, Captain. I'll have to override the safety limiters on the impulse drivers manually. It's never been done on the Odyssey at this speed. You do it, Rivers replied, her hand tightening on the chair back. The Federation can rebuild a Starship. It can't replace its crew. Julie Hayes, struggling to override the communications blackout, spun her chair around, pale. Captain, I'm reading a massive energy spike. No, 3 of them. They're coming from the opposite side of the singularity. Not Federation energy signatures. Karen Hudson slammed her fist on the console. Impossible. No known vessel could survive in that region. Their shields would be... She trailed off, then rapidly consulted a secondary readout. Wait, they're feeding on the anomaly's energy, siphoning off the plasma pulses that are killing us, treating it like a fueling depot. Rivers' eyes narrowed. A calculated threat, or simply a vessel whose technology was alien enough to withstand this hell? It didn't matter right now. Survival came first. Hold all fire orders. We don't have the power to engage, Rivers said, her gaze returning to Hampton. Hudson, analyze those energy signatures, but keep your primary focus on the Odyssey's integrity. We're still hemorrhaging power. The main view screen flickered violently, and a piece of hull plating broke away from the Odyssey, spiraling into the vortex. The sound of the breach was muffled, but the shudder that traveled through the deck was not. Dr. Henderson's voice crackled, raw and strained, over the comms. Rivers, for minutes to core breach. I've been hit by an electrical surge. Lost one of my assistants, but I've got my hands on the bypass conduits. I'm going to shunt power from the main reactor directly into the maneuvering thrusters before they fail, as you ordered. But Captain, this is a one-shot deal. If the thrusters don't fire at max capacity, the backflow will vaporize the primary reactor instantly. Understood, Doctor, Rivers said, her mind already moving past the terrible cost. An assistant gone. A casualty already. This was survival. Jason, prepare for Dr. Henderson's power injection. Mark, count down from 10 seconds to the point of turn. I want that burn to be precise. Do you hear me? Precise. Hughes nodded sharply, beginning the countdown. 10, 9. Hampton hunched over the controls, his hands gripping the stick as if he could impose his will on the Starship. Sweat dripped onto the console, sizzling as it hit the exposed circuitry. 6, 5. Hayes braced herself, her eyes wide as she stared at the chronometer, confirming the terrifying speed of the countdown. 4. From the bowels of the ship, a deep, resonating hum started, the sound of the reactor core being forced to feed an impossible amount of energy into the tiny, overworked impulse thrusters. The deck trembled so violently that Rivers had to grab the railing for support. Dr. Henderson, engage power transfer now. Rivers barked. Power transfer engaged. Godspeed, Captain. Henderson's voice was a ragged shout, immediately followed by the sound of tearing metal. A deafening roar erupted from the stern as the thrusters received the catastrophic surge of energy. Hampton's entire body tensed. 2, 1. Mark. Now. Hughes screamed. Hampton slammed the stick hard to port. The Odyssey, despite its massive size, groaned like a dying beast and executed the impossible. It lurched sideways at a near-right angle, the inertia restraints screaming in protest as they barely contained the bridge crew. For a heart-stopping second, the side of the ship faced the chaotic, swirling light of the anomaly, which seemed to swallow all light and hope. Then, with a shudder that felt like the ship's spine had cracked, the Odyssey broke free, slingshotting away from the crushing gravity well. The immense, unnatural energies of the Apex Anomaly receded instantly behind them, replaced by the empty, silent blackness of an unknown star system. The bridge was plunged into semi-darkness as all but essential emergency lighting failed. The klaxons died, replaced by a dreadful, eerie silence punctuated only by the sizzle of cooling metal and the rapid, ragged breathing of the crew. The Odyssey was still alive, but barely. It was a dark, battered metal husk adrift. The silence was heavier than the crushing pressure of the anomaly had been. It was the silence of catastrophic failure, of exhaustion, and of uncertain survival. Rivers let out a slow, controlled breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She moved back to her command chair, her posture still rigid. The emergency lighting flickered weakly, revealing the grim state of the bridge. Consoles smoked, circuits sparked faintly, and debris littered the deck. "Report. Now," she ordered, her voice flat, the urgency replaced by a terrifying calm. Pilot Hampton slumped back, his head resting against the headrest, completely spent. "The Sling-Brake worked, Captain. We're clear of the anomaly's pull. The maneuvering thrusters are gone, vaporized, just as predicted. Impulse drive is offline. Warp drive is fried. We are adrift." "Structural integrity?" Rivers asked, scanning the main display, now filled with blinking red diagnostics. Science Officer Hudson, though visibly shaken, was already running scans. Hull integrity at 60%. Microfractures on decks 4, 5, and 6, but not catastrophic. Inertial dampeners offline, gravity plating cycling erratically, but the biggest issue is the core. "Dr. Henderson, status." Henderson's voice came back, raspy and laced with adrenaline. "I'm still here, Captain. The direct power shunt saved us, but the primary reactor is ruined. Stable for now, but offline. Fusion generators are powering life support, the bridge, and the medical bay only. I need hours, maybe days, to stabilize the matter/antimatter balance and even think about auxiliary impulse power. We're running on fumes, Captain. We are a tomb floating in space." A cold knot formed in River's stomach. A tomb. Thousands of light years beyond the known frontier, with no ability to move or fight. "Mark Hughes, give me our position," Rivers commanded. Hughes keyed in the data, his fingers moving stiffly. "We've been thrown completely off the charted route, Captain. The momentum of the Sling-Brake maneuver, combined with the gravitational shear of the anomaly, threw us into a region of space completely undocumented by the Federation. We are in a Class M system orbiting a G-type star, but I can't match the stellar configuration to anything in the charts." "Confirmed," Hudson added grimly. "We're in the black. No star chart matches, no navigational beacons. Our last Federation coordinate was light years ago, near the Apex Anomaly's perimeter. We are completely, utterly isolated." Rivers turned to Communications Officer Julie Hayes, whose station was the most heavily damaged, sparking occasionally despite the drop in power. "Julie, the long-range comms. Can you punch through to Starbase K? For now that the anomaly's interference is gone." Hayes was desperately trying to patch a power conduit with a makeshift bypass cable. She looked up, her expression defeated. "I'm routing power from my backup battery, Captain. I can barely send a short-range tight beam transmission. To reach K4. They were several weeks away at top warp speed. Without the comms array, and at this range, it's hopeless. We are cut off. The Federation doesn't know where we are, or even if we survived." The devastating reality settled on the bridge. Their mission, exploration, diplomacy, discovery was over. It was now a mission of survival. The Odyssey was no longer a vessel of discovery. It was a lifeboat. Rivers straightened her tunic, trying to banish the cold dread. Captain could not afford despair. "Understood. We survived the anomaly. Now we survive the aftermath." She swept her gaze across the bridge, meeting each officer's eyes. "Jason Hampton, shift all available sensor power to internal diagnostics and damage control. You are now temporary chief engineer. Get down there and assist the doctor. Karen, I want a full sensor sweep of this star system. We need to know where we are and if there are any resources or threats nearby." "Aye, Captain," Hudson said, immediately turning her attention to the deep space sensors. "Julie, jury-rig that comms system. Even if you can't reach the Federation, we need to monitor for local traffic. Mark, begin the daunting task of mapping this system. We need a new home if we can't fix the engines." Rivers activated her own console. The list of active systems was depressingly short. The ship was silent, cold, and dark. But the Odyssey still had its crew. We have food, air, and water for an extended period, but no movement. We are a beacon to anyone who might pass by, Rivers murmured, half to herself. We move to silent running and prepare defenses. We may be a wreck, but we will not be easy prey. Before she could issue the formal order, a sharp chime broke the silence, the chime of an active long-range sensor lock. Captain, I'm getting a reading. Hudson's voice was tense, eyes glued to the display. Massive energy signature, bearing 041 Mark 19, and closing fast. It's the same 3 contacts we detected inside the Apex Anomaly. How fast? Rivers demanded, her hand instinctively moving toward the tactical panel. They're moving at high impulse, Captain. They must have jumped from the anomaly directly to our system. They covered the distance in moments. They're not scanning, they're hunting. Estimated time to engagement, 3 minutes. The emergency power rerouting caused the image to shimmer, but the sight that materialized banished all thoughts of technical malfunction. It was unlike any vessel known to the Federation. The ship was a dark, angular wedge, its hull a patchwork of jagged, overlapping plates, enormous, with pulsing crimson energy conduits that gave the impression of veins on a predatory, living organism. Karen, identification, Rivers demanded. Hudson shook her head frantically, typing override commands. No match, Captain. Nothing in the database. Not Klingon, not Romulan, not even the fringe species from the Gamma Quadrant. This technology, it's entirely alien. The energy signature is the same one that was feeding off the anomaly high-density plasma consumption. They are incredibly advanced. Their shields. Non-existent, Captain. But they don't need them. Their hull integrity reading is off the charts. It's dense, almost impossible to penetrate. For massive energy conduits, they look like weapons batteries. They're charging. Now, the dark vessel, Contact Alpha, slowed its approach, stopping a mere 10 kilometers from the defenseless Odyssey. 2 smaller, identical vessels, Contact Beta and Contact Gamma, flanked the Odyssey. Rivers felt the cold, hard weight of reality press down on her. They were derelict, weaponless, and caught by a force completely outside their understanding. Julie, can we fire a warning shot? Anything to deter them? Rivers asked. Julie Hayes looked miserable. Captain, weapons are offline. I've barely got enough juice to cycle the deflector array, let alone power a photon torpedo tube. Our phaser banks are fused. We are running on less than 3% combat efficiency. We're utterly defenseless. Mark, bring us to silent running, Rivers ordered. Cut all non-essential power. I want the Odyssey to be as dark and inert as possible. Maybe they'll think we're abandoned. Cutting life support on Deck 6 and the non-critical labs, Mark Hughes reported, the bridge lights dimming further. The moments stretched into an agonizing silence. The alien ships made no move to attack, yet the atmosphere was heavy with menace. They were simply observing. They're not moving, Captain, Hudson whispered. They're locking us in a tractor beam of some kind. The subtle, low frequency, but they have us pinned. They could be analyzing our systems, our weaknesses. And they found plenty of those, Rivers muttered. She reached out and touched the primary communications panel, the cold metal a small anchor in the chaos. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it already. They're calculating, not impulsive, Rivers analyzed aloud. They want something, and that means we have leverage. It might be the only weapon we have left. She looked up at the image of the massive, frightening alien wedge. Julie, rear out all available power, what little you have, to the main antenna array. We will not hide. We will make contact. Open a channel, broad spectrum. Use every Federation frequency. We hail them. Hayes's eyes widened. Captain, that's broadcasting our position, our weakness, everything. It's an invitation to board. It's a declaration of intelligence, Rivers corrected, her voice steel. If we play dead, they'll salvage us, or worse. If we open communication, we become a diplomatic problem. not just debris. Open the channel, Julie. Let's see what these hunters want. Hayes swiftly executed the command. A faint, low-power ping went out into the blackness of space. The Odyssey's last, desperate gamble. For several heart-stopping seconds, there was no reply, only the cold, silent image of the massive alien ship. Then, the dark hull of Contact Alpha rippled, and a single, low-frequency transmission was beamed directly at the Odyssey. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't an encrypted code. It was a complex sequence of visual and auditory data, a burst of information that slammed against the Odyssey's sensors. Hudson gasped, clutching her headset. "Captain, I'm running it through the universal translator. The language, it's guttural, clicking, but the intent is being rendered. They're hailing us back." Rivers leaned forward, gripping the arms of her chair. "What do they say, Karen?" "Translate." Hudson listened, a look of profound distress washing over her features. She looked up at Rivers, her voice barely a whisper. The red alert klaxons, which Captain Rivers had hoped to silence permanently, sputtered back to a strained, intermittent life. The alien vessel, Contact Alpha, pulsed with crimson light, confirming its hostile intent. "Time for impact, Karen?" Rivers asked, her hand hovering over the control to arm the improvised probe mines. Science Officer Hudson was already scrambling to analyze the enemy's movements. "No kinetic weapons charging, Captain, but they're emitting a low-frequency harmonic burst. It's slamming into the dorsal array, Mark's makeshift shield." Navigator Mark Hughes slammed his fist on his panel. "It's a resonant frequency, Captain. They're not using force. They're using precision. They're finding the weak points in our hull and amplifying the structural damage the anomaly caused. The array is holding, but it's shattering the hull plating underneath." Before Rivers could respond, the Odyssey shuddered with a sickening, grinding sound. It was the sound of metal being sheared, not exploded. "They're not attacking with weapons," Rivers realized, her eyes locked on the main screen. "They're breaching us." "Julie, report." Communications Officer Julie Hayes, her face tight with fear, checked the internal sensors. "Multiple hull breaches. Decks 5 and 6 are compromised, and they've hit engineering and the main science lab. Not weapon fire, they've deployed boarding craft. Tiny, fast, heavily armored. They look like drones." "Dr. Henderson, Jason Hampton, report status in engineering." Rivers barked into the comms. The comm channel was static for a moment, then ship's pilot Jason Hampton's voice, now acting chief engineer, came through, laced with adrenaline and the sound of cracking metal. "They're here, Captain. Small, razor-sharp drones, they cut through the auxiliary maintenance lock like butter. They're trying to reach the main plasma conduits. We're fighting them with fire axes and compressed atmosphere vents, but there are dozens of them. Do not let them near the core conduits." "Henderson, what is their objective?" Rivers yelled. Dr. Jason Henderson, his voice strained but steady, replied, "They're not targeting personnel, Captain. They're targeting data banks and critical power regulation nodes. They're extracting intelligence, not destroying us. This is the harvest. They want the ship's mind, not the ship's body." Rivers' mind raced. If the aliens harvested their navigation logs and mission parameters, the Federation's entire exploration strategy would be compromised. Worse, they would learn of the Odyssey's crippled state. "Mark, reverse the power flow on the main deflector array. Full pulse," Rivers commanded. "If the dorsal array can't hold them out, maybe it can shake them off." Hughes quickly executed the complex maneuver. A sharp, powerful jolt rocked the Odyssey as the deflector dish fired a massive, localized energy pulse. On the screen, Contact Alpha barely flinched, but a few of the smaller drones attacking the hull seemed to stutter. The brief respite was all Rivers had time for. "Karen, that resonant frequency, is it uniform across their ship?" Hudson, hunched over her console, her eyes wide with frantic discovery, shook her head. "No, Captain. That's the genius of it. Their power source is drawing so much chaotic energy from the Apex Anomaly that it creates minute rhythmic instability. Look here. The primary propulsion coupling on contact alpha. It cycles between absorbing and venting power every 12 seconds. It's an exhaust port for raw, volatile energy. Rivers' eyes flashed with grim determination. A weakness. A tiny one. But it's something. She straightened, tapping a concealed access panel on the side of her command chair. The panel slid open, revealing a heavily shielded, black device the size of a fist. It hummed faintly with latent power. Julie Mark Karen. Look at this, Rivers said, her voice dropping. This is a zero-point EMP device. It's non-Federation tech, a contingency from the Intelligence Corps. One-time use. It generates a localized, concentrated energy burst capable of overloading all unshielded circuitry within a 50-kilometer radius. Hughes gasped. That's enough to permanently disable all 3 of those ships. But Captain, we can't even move 50 kilometers away, let alone to them. Exactly, Rivers confirmed. And if we use it now, the range is too great. We'll fry our own systems without touching Contact Alpha's primary processors. We have to be within 1 kilometer to guarantee a hit on their core systems. It's designed to be used in a ramming scenario. But the engines are dead. Hayes cried out, fear turning to desperation. We're a sitting duck. We can't get that close. The comms crackled again. Hampton's voice was ragged now, filled with the sounds of battle. Captain, they've breached the secondary engineering access. They're moving fast. We need more time, or more backup. Henderson is trying to overload the plasma lines, but the drones are too efficient. They're insulating their approach. Rivers' hand tightened around the EMP device. She was forced to make the impossible choice. Deploy the device now and risk only disabling the alien weapons, leaving the Odyssey crippled, or hold it and risk the aliens gaining the Federation's deepest secrets. Jason, I need one thing, and one thing only, Rivers said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Can you get any power to the impulse drivers? Even just a flicker. Enough for a single controlled burn, a single lurch of movement. I can try a direct bypass from the main capacitor array, Captain. But it's dangerously unstable. If I fail, we lose the last of our auxiliary power. We'll have no lights, no air, nothing. Hampton warned. Do it, Jason, Rivers commanded, the weight of 1,000 lives on her voice. We have a target and we have a weapon. We need to move. Karen, prep the firing sequence for the EMP. Julie, focus all remaining power on the helm station. Mark, you are calculating our maximum thrust capability with Hampton's bypass. I want a trajectory aimed directly at the venting port on Contact Alpha's propulsion coupling. We hit that vent in the 3-second window of instability. Trajectory calculated, Captain, Hughes reported, his fear giving way to professional focus. Maximum thrust from the bypass will give us a velocity of 0.05 times the speed of light. That's a direct hit on Contact Alpha in approximately 90 seconds. We'll be on them before they realize we can move. Just as the plan was set, a new, louder, tearing sound ripped through the bridge. The final sound of the hull giving way. Captain, the main hatch. The drones are cutting through the emergency shielding. Hayes screamed, pointing toward the forward turbolift bay. A section of the hatch melted, vaporizing with a sharp sizzle, and the first of the alien boarding drones, small, multi-legged, and covered in razor wire sensors, scuttled onto the bridge. This tiny mechanical head swiveled, instantly targeting the command chair. Weapons free, Rivers roared, grabbing a phased energy pistol from the console holster, a sidearm meant for border diplomacy, now their last defense. She fired a blinding blue bolt, vaporizing the lead drone. But 2 more followed, swarming the bridge. One lunged for Hayes, who barely ducked away. Hampton, status on impulse power, Rivers shouted, firing a second shot at a drone that was climbing her console. Charging, 20 seconds to full capacitor dump. Captain, Hampton's voice was barely audible over the fighting in engineering. Rivers raised her pistol at the drone skittering across the floor, aiming for its sensor array. If the Odyssey didn't move now, the bridge, and the EMP would be harvested. Mark, Julie, get to the aft escape hatch. That's an order. No, Captain, Hayes yelled, grabbing a fire extinguisher and spraying a cloud of foam over one of the drones, briefly short-circuiting its movement. Rivers knew she couldn't leave her post. If the ship moved, she had to be there to trigger the EMP at the precise moment. She leveled her pistol at the closest drone, preparing for the inevitable melee. 9 seconds to power, Hampton cried. Rivers took a deep breath, her dark hair falling across her determined eyes. She knew her sacrifice might be the only chance the Odyssey had. Karen, prep the EMP countdown now. I'll engage the moment we move. The drone that had targeted Julie Hayes lunged, its metallic legs clicking violently on the deck. Julie didn't panic. Instead of retreating, she swung the empty fire extinguisher like a club, knocking the drone sideways into the wall. It sputtered but quickly righted itself, its tiny sensor eye fixing on her again. Captain Rivers fired a third phaser bolt, vaporizing the legs of a drone climbing the tactical console. The air on the bridge now smelled sharply of ozone and scorched metal. 5 seconds to capacitor dump, Jason Hampton's strained voice shouted over the comms. The floor vibrated violently as the emergency energy surged from the defunct core systems. Karen Hudson stared at her screen, monitoring the alien ship. Contact Alpha. Captain, the vent is cycling. We hit it in exactly 4.8 seconds from the moment of thrust. The window is tiny. Mark, get ready to transfer helm control to the command chair's auxiliary system, Rivers ordered, aiming her weapon at the final, most determined drone crawling toward her feet. Transferring now, Captain. Mark Hughes's voice was taut with effort. He locked his controls, abandoning his station to sprint toward the aft escape hatch, dragging the stunned Julie Hayes with him. Rivers squeezed the phaser trigger one last time, vaporizing the last drone on the bridge. She holstered the weapon, her eyes fixed on the display. She had mere seconds before the next wave of boarders arrived. Hampton, now. Burn us out. Engaging bypass. Hold tight, Captain. A colossal electrical roar erupted from engineering. The ship lurched forward with a brutal, sickening jolt. Not a clean movement, but a desperate, uncontrolled shove. The momentum was enough to throw the remaining officers on the bridge against their restraints. The stars on the view screen, and the massive hull of Contact Alpha, leaped toward them. We are moving. We are on trajectory, Hudson yelled, gripping her console for dear life. Impact in 60 seconds. Rivers gripped the arms of her command chair, the black EMP device warm in her hand. The Odyssey was hurtling toward the towering, alien vessel, completely powerless and out of control. It was a metal dagger thrown in the dark. Karen, give me the countdown to the vent cycle. I need the exact millisecond of instability. Rivers' eyes were locked on the rapidly approaching enemy ship. 50 seconds. They haven't reacted. They don't see us as a threat. They think we're just debris, Hudson reported, her voice hysterical with the realization of the risk. The forward shield, a mere fragment of energy from the dorsal deflector, screamed as it cut through the residual gravitational field of Contact Alpha. Rivers felt the ship groan under the enormous stresses. Dr. Henderson's voice crackled over the comms, urgent and terrifying. Captain, the surge worked, but the plasma backflow is destabilizing the core. The core containment field is collapsing. Hampton is trying to reroute, but we won't last another minute. Get out of there. Rivers ignored the warning. Her fate, and the fate of the Odyssey, would be decided in the next 30 seconds. 30 seconds. 10 kilometers. Hudson screamed. Their vent is opening. It's charging with raw energy. The window is now. On the screen, the propulsion coupling of Contact Alpha glowed with a sickly yellow light. It was a raw, pulsating wound on the hull of the alien warship, their target. 20 seconds. 5 kilometers. Brace for impact. Rivers felt the crushing weight of the G-force. She could see the intricate, grotesque, vein-like conduits on the alien ship's hull filling the view screen. The small EMP device in her hand felt like the only functional piece of technology left in the Federation. 15 seconds. 1 kilometer. Captain. The energy surge is peaking. Hudson yelled. The instability window is open. Do it. Now. Rivers didn't hesitate. She slammed her hand down on the activation trigger of the 0-point EMP device. A blinding, silent flash of concentrated, localized energy erupted from the Odyssey. It was a burst of raw, controlled chaos, aimed directly at the pulsating vent on Contact Alpha. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the massive alien vessel went dark. The crimson, pulsating lights died instantly. The ship's imposing outline vanished from the view screen, leaving only the cold, empty stars behind. The low-frequency tractor beam holding the Odyssey dissipated, and the crippled Federation vessel drifted freely. A cheer erupted from the escape hatch where Hughes and Hayes were huddled. It worked! It worked, Captain! Hudson cried, tears streaming down her face. They are dark. All 3 contacts are dark. Their core processors are completely offline. Rivers slumped back into her command chair, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. They had gambled everything and won. But the victory was momentary. Julie, send out the low-power sensor probes. Rivers commanded, her voice weak but firm. Check on the boarding parties. Mark, scan the engineering comms. I need a status update from Hampton and Henderson now. A moment of hopeful silence stretched on the bridge. Then, the silence was shattered by a new, more terrifying sound. A loud, piercing hiss came from the turbolift bay, where the hole in the hatch remained. It was the sound of superheated steam, followed by the wet, metallic, rhythmic clicking of something massive and biological moving through the melted opening. Hudson froze, staring wide-eyed at the turbolift shaft camera on her monitor. Captain, the drones were just the beginning. I'm reading a massive organic signature, non-mechanical. It's a boarding party. A figure stepped onto the bridge. It was humanoid, taller and leaner than a human, clad in a sleek, obsidian carapace that seemed to absorb all light. Its head was small, insectal, and entirely focused on Captain Rivers. It carried no obvious weapon, but a long, flexible needle-like appendage extended from its forearm. The creature's voice, translated instantly by the bridge sensors, was a guttural whisper that chilled Rivers to the bone. The harvest must proceed. The EMP only delayed the inevitable. The figure took a predatory step toward the command chair. Rivers snatched her phaser pistol, but before she could raise it, the internal comms crackled one last time, the sound of agony in Hampton's voice. Captain, I failed. The core it's going critical. We're jettisoning. Get out now. The deck shuddered with the force of the jettisoned core. The creature paused, momentarily unbalanced. Rivers knew this was her final brutal choice. Escape or face the creature and the inevitable explosion. She met the creature's cold, insectal gaze. She would not let it have her ship or her secrets. Julie, Mark, Karen. Abandon bridge. Head to the long-range shuttle bay. That's an order. Rivers armed the ship's self-destruct sequence, locking the bridge hatch behind her team. She raised her weapon, her face set in grim resolve. The Odyssey was doomed, but Captain Rivers would not be harvested. The forced jettison of the core ripped through the USS Odyssey like a mortal wound. The deck heaved violently, throwing Captain Rivers forward. The self-destruct countdown she had initiated was now a silent, frantic red sequence blinking on her shattered display. She had 30 seconds. The obsidian carapaced alien boarder, now revealed as the true harvester, recovered instantly from the shockwave. It moved with unnatural speed, its insectal head swiveling as it closed the distance. The needle-like appendage on its forearm extended further, dripping with a thick, viscous fluid. Rivers didn't hesitate. She rolled, coming up onto one knee, and fired her phaser pistol. The energy bolt, weakened by the ship's failing systems, struck the creature's chest. Instead of vaporizing, the bolt merely sparked and spread across the alien's dense carapace, leaving behind a smoking white scorch mark. It was resistant to energy fire. The creature hissed, a sound like grinding metal, and lunged. Rivers didn't wait for impact. She slammed her hand down on the bridge lockout control, sealing the main exit and trapping the creature on the bridge with her. She then activated a localized magnetic field pulse, a desperate final defense. The pulse slammed into the harvester, pinning its heavy, armored feet momentarily to the deck plating. "Run, team," Rivers whispered, knowing her crew was abandoning the doomed vessel. She had 3 seconds of advantage. She threw the useless phaser pistol aside and grabbed a heavy piece of debris, a broken monitor stand, and swung it with the full force of desperation, striking the creature's head. The blow was solid, and a strange, dark ichor briefly dripped from its neck joint, but the harvester was immediately free. It raised its arm, the needle appendage slashing through the air where Rivers' head had been moments before. She scrambled back toward the command chair, pulling herself up. The countdown on her display was in single digits. In the engineering bay, Jason Hampton and Dr. Jason Henderson were fighting a losing battle against the heat and radiation spilling from the jettisoned plasma conduits. "Go! Jason, you have to go!" Henderson yelled, shoving the former pilot toward the damaged escape ladder. Henderson, the doctor, was already badly burned but held a makeshift welding torch, sealing a critical breach. "I can't leave you," Hampton shouted, pulling a scorched oxygen mask from his face. "You're the pilot. The Odyssey may be dead, but they need a pilot. Go!" Henderson screamed, as a new wave of electrical fire engulfed his position. "Tell the captain I stabilized the aft impulse vent. It might give them a momentary push." Hampton looked back, his face a mask of grief, then scrambled up the ladder, obeying the doctor's final order. On the bridge, the harvester had Rivers pinned against the command chair. The needle-like appendage was inches from her face. "Your data is now ours," the alien hissed, its voice an intrusion into her mind rather than her ears. "The harvest is complete." Rivers spat blood onto the deck. "No, it's not." With a final surge of strength, she reached out and slammed her fist onto a panel marked Emergency Overload. Life support. This was not a weapon. It was a distraction. All remaining oxygen was instantly vented from the bridge, replaced by inert nitrogen gas, lethal to a human, but designed to confuse and temporarily disable any organic threat. The harvester recoiled, its carapace contracting. The organic fluid in its veins reacted violently to the gas. It staggered back, momentarily stunned. This was the 3 seconds Rivers had bought. She launched herself out of the chair, sprinted across the bridge, and dove through the emergency access hatch Mark Hughes had sealed. The hatch was rigged with a manual internal release. She locked the harvester inside the choking bridge, trapping it with the self-destruct sequence. She landed hard on the catwalk leading to the shuttle bay, her lungs burning, then staggered forward. "Captain, here!" Karen Hudson and Julie Hayes waved frantically from the entrance to the long-range shuttle bay, their faces pale with relief and terror. Hampton was already there, strapping himself into the cockpit of the shuttle Pioneer. "Go! Go!" Rivers ordered, shoving Hudson and Hayes into the cramped passenger seats. "Wait! You have to come!" Hayes cried, reaching for her. "I'm locked out." Rivers lied, her heart breaking as she slapped the launch sequence panel. "I initiated the sequence. The countdown is almost done." The hatch to the shuttle bay sealed behind her as the shuttle's fusion engines hummed to life. "Jason, get us out of the kill zone. Now!" Rivers screamed into the shuttle comms. Hampton needed no second urging. The shuttle bay doors hissed open. Hampton engaged the forward thrust and then, remembering Henderson's final, desperate work, activated the aft impulse vent bypass he'd discovered. The shuttle Pioneer shot out of the exploding hull of the USS Odyssey. From the shuttle's cockpit, the crew watched as their magnificent Starship, their home, turned into a supernova. The self-destruct sequence detonated the last remaining antimatter fuel reserves. A blinding flash of white light consumed the bridge and the aft sections of the USS Odyssey. The resulting explosion, a silent, beautiful spectacle of ultimate destruction, sent a shockwave that buffeted the shuttle and vaporized the alien harvester and the boarding drones. The core systems of the three silent alien vessels, Contact Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, remained dark, immobilized by the EMP strike. They had survived the detonation, but their internal circuitry was ruined. They were floating hulks, the wreckage of the Odyssey their final, useless prize. Hampton steadied the Pioneer several million kilometers from the debris field. He looked back at his crew. Julie Hayes was sobbing silently, Mark Hughes was staring in shock, and Karen Hudson was meticulously scanning the wreckage, her scientific mind unable to stop cataloging the loss. We survived," Hampton whispered, his voice thick with loss. Julie Hayes pointed a trembling finger at the main shuttle viewport. "The alien ships, they're still there. Dark, but still there. They're not threats anymore, Julie," Hudson said, her voice hollow. "The EMP worked. They're dead in the water just like we were. But they're a warning. We know nothing about the enemy we just made." Hampton turned to the captain's chair. It was empty. Rivers had sealed the exterior shuttle bay doors just before launch, isolating herself on the catwalk. The force of the explosion had blown the bay doors off their hinges, and the catwalk was now just a twisted fragment of metal. But clinging to that fragment, shielded by the rapidly collapsing hull plating, was Rivers. She was severely injured, her breath coming in shallow gasps, but she was alive. She had been expelled into space with the explosion, wearing only her torn uniform, miraculously protected from total decompression by a tiny, localized emergency shield patch she had activated on her belt. A final, forgotten piece of tech. "Sensors are picking up Captain Rivers," Hudson shouted, her voice breaking through the despair. "She's critical, but alive. She's holding on to a piece of debris about 20 kilometers out." Hampton's hands flew to the controls. The pilot in him instantly took over. "Aft thrusters minimal burn. Julie, prepare the external rescue winch. We are bringing her home." Hours later, the shuttle Pioneer was drifting silently in the uncharted system. The 4 crew members had established a minimal life support loop, their faces illuminated only by the faint glow of the shuttle's controls. Captain Elara Rivers lay on the cramped medical berth, her body severely bruised and her ribs fractured, but alive. Dr. Henderson had not survived the core breach, but his sacrifice had saved the crew. Rivers opened her eyes and looked at the 4 faces gathered around her. Jason Hampton, the new pilot and de facto commander. Julie Hayes, the communications officer who had proven her bravery. Mark Hughes, the navigator already charting their course home. And Karen Hudson, the science officer analyzing their escape. "Status," Rivers rasped, her voice weaker than they had ever heard it. Hampton knelt beside her. "The Odyssey is gone, Captain. Henderson is gone. We are 4,000 light-years from Federation space, in a shuttle designed for short-range travel with limited supplies. But the alien threat is neutralized, for now. We escaped the harvest." Rivers nodded slowly, a small, grim smile touching her lips. "Then the mission is the same. Survival." She looked out the viewport at the swirling nebula of the uncharted system. Beyond the safety of the known frontier, they were survivors adrift in an ocean of the unknown, hunted by an enemy whose nature they could only guess. "Set a course, Navigator Hughes," Rivers commanded, the fire returning to her eyes. "We will not be harvested. We will go home. And we will warn the Federation." The Pioneer, a speck of human technology against the vast, indifferent darkness, turned its nose toward the distant, faint glow of the galaxy.